Hello, my YouTube channel subscribers to Big Bill Anderson's Death Tours. I am at 1718 Parkside Avenue in the city of Burbank, California, where in 1953, this house right behind me was the scene of a grisly murder. 65-year-old Mabel Monohan was brutally murdered by Barbara Graham and 4 male accomplices right here in this house. This house sparked Susan Hayward into winning an Academy Award in 1958 for the movie I Want to Live, which was a recounting of the life story of Barbara Graham. 4 of the people that involved in this crime were killed besides Mabel Monohan. I'll tell you the whole story. It's brutal. It involves Hollywood. It involves the Los Angeles Police Department. It's incredible. Thank you for watching my channel, my friends. Mabel Monohan was a retired vaudeville performer and professional ice skater that in her younger years toured the country performing. And this is what led up to Mabel's death right here at this house. The widowed Mabel Monohan's former son-in-law, Tudor Shearer, was a Las Vegas gambler and a bit of a braggart. He let it be known that he routinely left large sums of money in this house, in a safe, sometimes up to $100,000. If not for his big mouth, Mabel would never have been murdered. Remember, in 1953, $100,000 was like $1 million today. So, Mabel Monohan's daughter, Iris, had been married to Shearer, and when they divorced, she got to keep the house in Burbank, right here. When Iris remarried and moved to New York, she gave the house to her mother, Mabel. And it was ideal for Mabel and her pet Labrador Retriever, Ziggy. Jailhouse gossip is a dangerous thing, and ex-cons Emmett Perkins and Jack Santos were greedy and gullible and looking for an easy score. What could be easier than robbing a widow in sleepy town of Burbank, California? Mabel and a friend of hers went out together on the evening of March 8th, 1953. On that same night in San Fernando Valley Drive-In, Jack Santo, Emmett Perkins, John True, Baxter Shorter, and a prostitute named Barbara Graham held a quiet dinner meeting. The 4 thugs and the attractive redhead were planning to invade Monohan's home the following night. Initially, everything went according to plan. The gang met for dinner less than 2 miles from Mabel's home, and when they felt it was dark enough, they drove over to her property. The anticipation was high. $100,000 was one hell of a lot of cash for 4 ex-cons and a junkie prostitute. Baxter Shorter, the gang's safecracker, wasn't keen on bringing a woman along for the job, but Emmett Perkins explained to him that Monohan was a little paranoid about security and spooked very easily. They needed a woman to gain entrance to the house. Barbara went to Mabel's front door right here and rang the bell. As predicted, Mabel didn't immediately open up. A few tense moments ticked off as the porch light came on and the murmur of muted conversation drifted over to the men who were waiting in the dark. Barbara had to be very convincing to persuade Mabel to open up her door to a stranger. But she sold the old lady on the story of a broken-down car and how grateful she'd be if she could use her telephone to call for help. Mabel was reluctant, but the young woman was alone, and the widow knew firsthand how scary it could be for a woman on her own at night. The men in cars watched as Mabel finally opened her door to Barbara. All hell was about to break loose. After Barbara entered the threshold of this home, her 4 accomplices followed right behind. They quickly had the elderly woman subdued on the floor. They pistol whipped her and dragged her from room to room, trying to make her reveal the location of the safe. The reality was there was no safe, and that slowly grew apparent to the gang. As Mabel Monohan moaned in pain and was bleeding profusely, Barbara Graham strangled her to death and pistol whipped her. After all of this, the gang left with nothing to show for their brutal efforts. The robbery attempt was a futile effort. The gang found nothing of value in the house and left empty-handed. They later learned they had missed about $15,000 in jewels and valuables, $140,000 in today's value, stashed in a purse in the closet near where they had murdered Monohan. Mabel Monohan's body wasn't found for 2 days. Her gardener, Mitchell Truesdale, had come to do some work and collect his paycheck. When he went to the front door, he noticed that it was ajar, and that was highly unusual. He gave the door a nudge and started in. He could see that the normally neat house had been turned upside down and the smell of death was pervasive. He found Mabel's body, and he saw a blood spatter on the walls and floors. Monohan's Labrador Retriever Ziggy was whining at the back door. Truesdale ran to the neighbor's house and called the police. Mabel's daughter, Iris, had only recently returned to New York after spending some time with her mother. She offered a $5,000 reward for the information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killer or killers. The investigation into the slaying of the Burbank widow began. Baxter Shorter, the safecracker, told the police he had gone along on the Monohan job as a lookout. Of course, that was a lie. He was there to crack the safe supposedly hidden at the house. Shorter further stated that he had seen Emmett Perkins slug Mrs. Monohan on the head with the butt of a gun. Baxter Shorter probably would have walked on the Monohan murder and lived to commit other crimes if details of his statement hadn't been leaked by someone close to the investigation. Once his duplicity became public, Baxter Shorter's days were numbered. He had made a deal with the police to turn on the others, but the gang caught wind of his betrayal and kidnapped him from his home and presumably murdered him, since he was never seen again to this day. When the police finally captured the rest of the gang, John True then offered to turn state's evidence against the others in exchange for immunity for prosecution. Barbara Graham, Emmett Perkins, and Jack Santo were all sentenced to death for robbery and murder. Graham appealed her sentence while serving time at California Institute for Women in Chino. Her appeals failed and was transferred to death row at San Quentin State Prison on June 3, 1955 at 11:28 a.m. Graham was led from her cell to be strapped in the gas chamber chair. There she requested a blindfold so she would not have to look at the observers. Her last words were, "Good people are always so sure they're right." On being advised that taking a deep breath after the cyanide pellets were dropped would make it easier, she replied, "How the hell would you know?" The 1958 film I Want to Live was made about this case, and Susan Hayward won an Oscar for her tough but sympathetic portrayal of Barbara Graham. My son Audie and I just recently visited Mabel Monohan's grave in Angeles Rosedale Cemetery and paid our respects. I said a prayer over Mabel's grave and hope to God nothing like this could ever happen again to someone. Thank you for watching this video, my friends.